Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. In the year 2375, Earth, the cradle of humanity, stood as the last bastion against an overwhelming force of destruction. The outer colonies, once vibrant with life and promise, had fallen one by one, reduced to smoldering ruins by the relentless Xylar, a mysterious alien species with a single-minded goal, the total annihilation of humankind. Now, with the fall of Nova Centauri, the final colony, Earth was all that remained. General Ethan Kane watched the last transmission from Nova Centauri in grim silence. The grainy holographic image flickered with static as explosions lit up the darkened sky of the distant planet. The screams of the dying, the desperate pleas for help, none of it could be answered. Not anymore. The Xylar ships loomed in the background, their massive forms blotting out the stars, a silent, unstoppable force of nature. Beside him, Dr. Sarah Whitmore clenched her fists until her knuckles turned white. She had seen too many of these reports, witnessed too many worlds fall. Yet, each time, the pain cut deeper. "We have to act now, General," she said, her voice trembling with barely suppressed emotion. "If we don't deploy the Aegis, Earth will be next." General Kane turned to face her, his eyes hard as steel. "You know the risks, Dr. Whitmore. The Aegis is untested. If it fails, it won't fail," she interrupted, her voice firm. "It can't. We've come too far, lost too much. This is our last chance." Kane held her gaze for a long moment before nodding. "Prepare the team. We leave within the hour." Earth had become a fortress. Every major city was a stronghold, every citizen a soldier in the final war for survival. The streets buzzed with activity as people went about their duties with the grim determination of those who knew their lives depended on it. Above, the skies were filled with military craft, patrolling, scouting, preparing for the inevitable onslaught that in an underground facility deep beneath the ruins of what was once Washington, D.C., Dr. Whitmore oversaw the final preparations for Project Aegis. The weapon, a sleek, cylindrical device about the size of a human torso, pulsed with a faint, eerie light. It was powered by a strange energy source unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, an energy that had been harvested from a captured Xylar ship. The technology was alien, almost incomprehensible, yet somehow, they had made it work. As the team assembled, Whitmore couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. She hadn't told them everything. The energy source, the very heart of the Aegis, was derived from something far more sinister than mere alien technology. It was sentient, or at least, it had once been. The Xylar had somehow harnessed the consciousness of captured human minds, twisted and repurposed them into a power source. She had discovered this dark secret only days ago, but by then, it was too late to turn back. General Kane entered the room, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Is the weapon ready?" Whitmore nodded. "It's ready. But there's something you need to know." "No time for that now," Kane cut her off, his tone brooking no argument. "We're moving out." The team comprised the best humanity had to offer. Captain Maria Sanchez, a pilot with unmatched skill and a fierce hatred for the Xylar, stood ready in her flight suit, her eyes burning with determination. Lieutenant Jackson Reeve, a towering figure of muscle and metal, was a product of the military's cybernetic enhancement program. He had survived battles that would have killed a lesser man, and now, he was humanity's best hope for delivering the Aegis to its target. The mission was simple, yet perilous: infiltrate the Xylar mothership orbiting Mars and deploy the Aegis at its core. The weapon's blast radius would be enough to destroy the mothership and, with any luck, cripple the Xylar's ability to continue their assault on Earth. It was a desperate plan, but desperation was all they had left. The journey to Mars was tense, the silence in the ship punctuated only by the hum of the engines and the occasional status report. As they neared their destination, the Xylar mothership came into view, a monstrous structure of jagged black metal, pulsing with a sickly green light. It was as if the ship itself were alive, breathing with the malevolent intent of its creators, Sanchez expertly maneuvered their vessel through the outer defenses, dodging beams of energy and swarms of Xylar drones. The ship shuddered as it took a hit, but Reeves' steady hand on the controls kept them on course. "We're almost there," Sanchez called out, her voice tight with concentration. "Get ready for the breach." As they neared the docking bay, a group of Xylar warriors emerged, their insectoid forms bristling with weapons. Reeve didn't hesitate. He charged forward, his cybernetic limbs moving with inhuman speed as he engaged the enemy. The Xylar fought with terrifying efficiency, their movements precise and coordinated, but Reeves' enhancements gave him the edge. He tore through them, his fists and feet smashing through exoskeletons with brutal force. Inside the ship, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The corridors were dark, lit only by the occasional flicker of green light from the walls. The team moved quickly, their footsteps echoing ominously in the silence. As they approached the core, they encountered more resistance, Xylar drones, heavily armored and armed with devastating weaponry. The battles were fierce, but the team pressed on, driven by the knowledge that the fate of humanity rested on their shoulders. Finally, they reached the core chamber. It was a massive room, dominated by a towering structure of pulsating green energy. The hive mind, the central intelligence that controlled every Xylar across the galaxy, resided here. The team could feel its presence, an oppressive weight that pressed down on their minds, filling them with dread and despair. Dr. Whitmore approached the core with the Aegis in hand. She hesitated for a moment, her mind racing with doubts. The weapon was designed to disrupt the hive mind's connection to its drones, severing the control it held over them. But would it also destroy the consciousnesses trapped within, the human minds that had been twisted and enslaved by the Xylar? She didn't know. No one did. "Do it," Kane's voice was a harsh whisper, his eyes fixed on the core. "We don't have time for second thoughts." With a deep breath, Whitmore activated the Aegis. The device began to glow, its light growing brighter and more intense until it was almost blinding. The core reacted violently, its energy pulsing erratically as it struggled against the foreign intrusion. The air was thick with tension as the team braced themselves for the outcome. Suddenly, the hive mind spoke. Its voice was a cacophony of sounds, 1,000 voices speaking as one, filling the chamber with a chilling, otherworldly tone. "You cannot destroy us," it intoned, its words reverberating through their minds. "We are eternal. We are inevitable." The vision that followed was horrifying. The team saw Earth, their home, consumed by the Xylar. The cities were in flames, the people hunted and slaughtered, the planet reduced to a wasteland. The hive mind was showing them their future, a future where humanity no longer existed. But Whitmore saw something else in the vision, something that the hive mind hadn't intended to show. She saw the truth of the Aegis, the potential to save not just humanity, but the lost souls trapped within the Xylar. If she could modify the weapon, redirect its energy, it might be possible to sever the hive mind's control without destroying the consciousnesses it had enslaved. "Kane, I can save them," she said, her voice barely audible over the roar of the hive mind. "I can save them all." Kane looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Are you sure?" "No," she admitted. "But it's our only chance." For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then Kane nodded. "Do it." With trembling hands, Whitmore adjusted the settings on the Aegis, rerouting its energy output. The device began to vibrate violently, its light growing dimmer as it reconfigured itself. The hive mind screamed in protest, its voice a deafening roar that echoed through their minds, but Whitmore held firm. The moment the Aegis activated, the core exploded with light. The hive mind's voice was abruptly cut off, replaced by a deafening silence. The Xylar drones in the chamber collapsed, their connection to the hive mind severed. The team stood frozen, hardly daring to believe what had just happened. As the light faded, they saw the core had been destroyed, its structure shattered into a million pieces. The Aegis lay on the ground, its power spent. Whitmore fell to her knees, exhausted but relieved. They had done it. The Xylar were defeated, but the victory was bittersweet. Captain Sanchez was gone, her sacrifice enabling them to reach the core. And though the hive mind had been destroyed, there was no telling what had happened to the consciousnesses it had enslaved. Whitmore could only hope that they had been released, their torment finally ended. The journey back to Earth was somber. The team had won the battle, but the cost had been high. General Kane stared out at the stars, his mind heavy with the weight of his decisions. He had saved humanity, but at what price? The future was uncertain, and the scars of this war would linger for generations. Dr. Whitmore, too, was lost in thought. The Aegis had worked, but it had been born from suffering and death. She couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had crossed a line, delving into technologies and powers they barely understood. She vowed to dedicate her life to ensuring that such horrors would never be repeated. As they approached Earth, the blue-green planet glowing softly against the backdrop of space, Kane finally spoke. "We did it, Sarah. We saved them." "Yes," she replied, her voice tinged with sadness. "But the fight isn't over. Not for us." And so, as the ship descended through the atmosphere, the survivors of the last stand of Terra prepared for the next battle. For in the shadows of the galaxy, new threats loomed, and humanity's struggle for survival was far from over. As the ship touched down on the Earth's surface, the team disembarked in silence, the weight of their mission pressing heavily on their shoulders. The atmosphere on the ground was markedly different from when they had left. The tense urgency of impending doom had been replaced by a somber, almost eerie stillness. The air seemed thick with the collective grief of a planet that had faced annihilation and survived, but not without scars. General Kane led the way through the fortified compound, his gaze focused straight ahead, his mind already turning to the next steps. There would be debriefings, assessments of the damage inflicted by the Xylar, and preparations for whatever might come next. Earth had been saved, but the war was far from over. Dr. Whitmore followed a few paces behind, lost in thought. She couldn't shake the images of the Aegis's final moments, the blinding light, the horrific visions projected by the hive mind, and the gut-wrenching uncertainty of what had happened to the consciousnesses it had controlled. The Aegis had worked, but it had been a tool born of desperation and built on a foundation of suffering. The victory felt hollow, and she knew she wasn't alone in that feeling. They entered the command center, a large, dimly lit room filled with screens and consoles displaying real-time data from across the planet. The usual buzz of activity was subdued, the operators speaking in hushed tones as they processed the aftermath of the battle. Kane strode to the center of the room, where a group of high-ranking officers and officials had gathered. He nodded to them, a silent acknowledgement of their shared burden. "General," one of the officers greeted him, his voice heavy with the exhaustion of a man who had been awake far too long. "We've received word from the other defense stations. It's confirmed, the Xylar forces are in disarray. Their ships have gone dark, and we're not detecting any further movement." Kane nodded. "Good. But let's not assume this is over. We need to remain vigilant. The Xylar hive mind may be destroyed, but that doesn't mean they're all gone." The officer nodded in agreement, but there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes, a hope that had been absent for far too long. "Understood, sir. We'll maintain heightened alert status and continue to monitor for any signs of activity." As the officers dispersed to carry out their orders, Kane turned to Whitmore. "We need to talk," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He led her to a small, private room adjacent to the command center, closing the door behind them. Once they were alone, Kane's composed facade slipped slightly, revealing the weariness and doubt beneath. "Sarah, I need to know everything about that weapon. What exactly did you see in the core? What did you do?" Whitmore took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "The Aegis, it was more than just a weapon. The energy source we used, it was sentient, or at least, it had been. It was made from the consciousnesses of people, humans who had been captured and twisted by the Xyler. When I was in the core, I realized that if we used the Aegis as originally planned, we might have destroyed those consciousnesses along with the hive mind. Kane's eyes narrowed. So you changed it. You rerouted the energy. Yes, she admitted, meeting his gaze. I redirected it to target the hive mind specifically, hoping to sever its control without annihilating the souls trapped inside. I don't know if it worked. I don't know what happened to them. For a moment, Kane said nothing, his expression unreadable. Then he let out a long breath, running a hand through his hair. You did what you had to do. We all did. But this is going to have consequences, Sarah. We've crossed a line, used technology we barely understand. And now, we don't even know what we've unleashed. Whitmore nodded, her throat tight with emotion. I know. But I couldn't let them die like that, not when there was a chance to save them. Kane placed a hand on her shoulder, a rare gesture of comfort from the usually stoic general. You did the right thing. We'll figure this out. Together. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their decisions hanging heavy between them. Outside, the world was beginning to stir again, the first tentative steps of a civilization that had just stared into the abyss and found a way to pull back. As they left the room, Kane was approached by one of the officers, who handed him a data pad. Sir, we've received a transmission. It's strange. It's not coming from any known human source, but it's using our communication protocols. Kane's brow furrowed as he took the pad, scrolling through the message. His expression darkened as he read. This can't be right. Sarah, you need to see this. Whitmore took the pad from him, her eyes scanning the lines of text. The message was brief, but its implications were staggering. We are the freed. We remember. We seek redemption. She looked up at Kane, her heart pounding in her chest. They're still out there. The consciousnesses, they're alive, and they're trying to communicate. Kane's mind raced, the possibilities spinning out in front of him. This could be a trap, another Xyler trick. Or it could be the beginning of something we never expected. Whitmore shook her head, her mind already working through the implications. If they're really out there, if they've been freed from the hive mind, they might hold the key to understanding the Xyler, to stopping them for good. We have to try to make contact, to find out what they know. Kane nodded, his resolve hardening. Agreed. But we proceed with caution. We've won a battle, not the war. We can't afford to let our guard down. As they prepared to delve into this new mystery, the sense of unease that had settled over them did not dissipate. They had fought to save humanity, but in doing so, they had unleashed something they did not yet fully understand. The war was far from over, and the next steps they took would determine the fate of not just Earth, but perhaps the entire galaxy. The world outside the command center was slowly coming back to life, the first rays of dawn breaking over the horizon. The sun rose on a world that had survived against all odds, a world that now had to face the consequences of its survival. General Kane and Dr. Whitmore stood side by side, watching as the light spread across the sky, their thoughts heavy with the knowledge that their fight was not yet finished. As they turned back to the tasks at hand, there was no need for words. They knew what had to be done. The last stand of Terra had ended, but a new chapter was just beginning, one that would test their courage, their ingenuity, and their humanity like never before.